Welcome listeners to the Women's Power Hour show. You're here with me, Yvonne B. And my guest today is Ashley Costello, who is a psychotherapist. And she's going to be sharing some of her expertise as well as her journey. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Oh, Yvonne, it's so lovely to be on the show, and we've been in touch for a little while, so it's really lovely to, finally hook up and have this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are a number of questions I want to ask for you on a personal level around self-care, but I really think for the listeners' benefit, it would be great for you to just share a little bit about who you are. Who is Ashley Costello? What's your journey been, and what led you into psychotherapy?
Well, probably quite a long journey. I was one of those really weird kids that kind of knew what they wanted to do at an early age. I think I was about 14 when I thought I want to do psychology. I didn't really know what it was, if I'm honest. And just various things happened in my life. My dad had a nervous breakdown, which meant that as kids, we were kind of exposed to not just what that behavior and stuff. This was after I wanted to go into psychology, actually.
Yes.
But not only kind of his behavior and how that affected him and stuff, how it affected the whole family, how it affected my mum specifically as his partner, and also how he was treated, how then he goes into this massive hospital system and how, and thank God my dad is fine and everything was fine. But it kind of really made me think about how the brain works and how it can go wrong so easily and so quickly if we don't take care of it. So I ended up going to university to study psychology, absolutely loved it. Specialized in counseling and neuroscience, actually. That was after my degree.
Yes.
And in honesty, the only part of my degree that I would say I wasn't as keen on was the brain side.
Oh, okay.
Just because it was really difficult. So, but then went on to study it kind of later and loved it. I love it now. I absolutely love it. It is hard, but I love it. And it explains a lot. But then I kind of did the usual path of getting married, having kids, things like that, and worked for big corporates, but always worked for big educational establishments here in the UK and abroad, and loved it. But I've always kind of keep coming back to working for myself because it just is one of those things where I have control over stuff like the time I can spend at home. Yes. My own self-care, which is really important in my job because looking after everybody else's mental health, you need to make sure you look after yours. So so that's kind of me really. A couple of years ago did a TEDx talk, and with that was a real shift in my business and also in the way that I look after myself as well, I guess.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the TEDx talk because we're going to have a little break. And then when we come back, I want to speak to you about that because that content around education, children's resilience, etc., I think is not only fascinating, but really important. It's an important conversation. So let's take a little break, Ashley, and we'll come back and pick up with that. Well, we are back in the studio with the lovely Ashley Costello, who's been sharing a little bit about herself, her personal journey through education, starting a family, to running her own business as a psychotherapist. Now, Ashley, you mentioned just at the end there about the TEDx talk that you did. And I know that one arm of your business, and I say one arm because I think you venture into kind of different areas, but is around building resilient children and making that part of their education. And that was really what your TEDx talk was focused on. And my question to you is, how is the current education system failing our children? And what difference will building resilience make?
Wow. So, yeah, it really is failing. I'd love to say that it isn't, but we are, you know, because
Yes.
I think we look at education and go, oh well, it's them, it's the education secretary, it's the teachers, it's the heads. It isn't. It's us as a community, because this is what we accept. So therefore, it is.
Yes.
There's a couple of things that I think really important. I think we look at skills, or we value skills such as passing assessments or exams, things like that. We look at rewarding memory or memorizing information. Now, Yvonne, without giving the game away, you and I are of a generation that didn't have smartphones when we
Indeed.
were at school. We didn't have the computer or the Google and all the other software that we have now, that the kids have now. So for me, I think, why are we still teaching them history in a way where they still have to memorize, you know, like the Battle of Hastings or something like that, when we can get it in 0.5 seconds on Google? Like, so why? You know, let's immerse them, let's use technology, absolutely, to immerse them in that time, to what it felt like, you know, things like that. I think we could be using the time spent on that kind of stuff and teaching them skills such as resilience, such as being resourceful, things like how to fail. You know, for me, watching a child fail from the sidelines is kind of exciting. And that sounds really harsh as a parent, you know, and as a therapist, but I know there's a lesson in there, and we've all done it. We've all been there where we failed and we've picked ourselves up and we've learned from that lesson. But actually, because technology is so fast-paced, we often don't learn those lessons because we've got something else to distract us. So if we can stop and teach our kids to evaluate their own failures, evaluate the lessons, and how do they move forward. Another big one for me, and that's come up recently on a chat that I had, and it's about bullying in schools as well, because actually our culture right now, what we do is we go, what did you do to wind them up? What did you do? You know, rather than hold on, just hold a second. Why is this kid bullying somebody else? What's going on with this child? Why are they hurting? Because Yvonne, we know hurt people hurt people. So you know, for me, the focus shouldn't be on the victim. It should be on the bully, but not in a way that, right, this is what we're going to do to punish you, but bring them back into community, bring them back into that circle of community and their friends, and say, what can we do? Because right now we're failing them. If that child feels that the only way they get attention, or the only way they can feel good about themselves or build that respect up, is by bullying another, then we're failing them. So yeah, that's just like 3 things already. I mean, we could go on all day, but yeah, they're the 3 big things for me that I think if we could change this as a society and say this is what we need from our education system, then I think, you know, the kids that we're going to produce would be amazing.
Yeah, and I think what you said there about, you know, when we're speaking to the bully, so in that bullying scenario, is that we are compassionate, because we're not usually, that's not what, it's usually the blame and the anger, which of course just fires. It doesn't help. So completely agree with you. I think, you know, there needs to be compassion, although it's difficult, because if it's your child that's the one that's being bullied, that's a really hard place. But actually, in trying to understand the other child's challenges and issues and what they're going through, because clearly something is going on for them too.
Absolutely. But I think as well, if you know, I don't know about you, but I've been in a situation where my child is getting picked on or bullied or whatever, and to, if we stress that the spotlight is on the bully, what we're saying is, this is not your fault. There's nothing to do with you as a victim. You're not a victim. You just happen to be the person they're taking out on. But it isn't anything personal, because the spotlight then is on the bully. And okay, well, what can we do that will help that kid? You know, as you know, and just bring them back into the fold. It happens all over the world. We're just really rubbish and behind on it.
Okay, Okay, now talking about resilience itself, so just explain, what does resilience mean, or what's the meaning that you put to resilience in your teaching?
So generally, resilience is usually thought of as like that bounce back ability. So if you've been through a trauma or a challenge or stress in your life, how you kind of, we're used to saying this in the UK here, aren't we, about pulling your socks up and getting on with it and having that determination and grit. And that's usually what resilience means. But for me, it's more than that. And I teach kids and I teach adults this as well. Going to a lot of big businesses with this concept that actually don't wait for that big challenge, that trauma, that challenge to hit you. Build your resilience ahead of time, because then when it hits, it's not going to hit as hard, and you're going to have the tools and the skills to be able to handle it. So rather than wait until you're on the floor to pick yourself up, why don't you build that resilience ahead of time? That's kind of, the way I view it. So as much as, I've been through a fair amount of challenge in my life, but I think I've got through because I've built my resilience. And whether that is, the resourcefulness in you, whether that's the community around you and that support network you have, whether it's, your sense of character or what you do for the community, these are all things that help build resilience. And it doesn't matter if, if you're 5 or you're 55, they'll all help build that resilience.
Excellent. Love that. Brilliant. Okay, so resilience is the way to go. That's what I'm getting from you, Ashley. So let's have another little break and we'll come back and we'll pick up on that conversation. Well, we are back. Ashley Costello has been with us today. She is a psychotherapist and she really focuses around building resilience, not just in children, though, also in adults. I think the whole package and the importance of it. Now, you've shared a bit about your journey into working for yourself, Ashley, and you've also spoken around the talk that you did for TEDx, which was around building resilience in children and about the education system, how it's failing and how we can make it better, really. It's not necessarily about throwing it all out the window, but how we can absolutely make it better. And I just wondered if you had a story that you could share around where you've seen, resilience put in place and how it's changed and helped somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's call him, I'm trying to think of a name so that we're not using his name. So there's a little boy who is about 7, currently really struggling at school for various reasons. There's possible parental situation, there's moved schools, moved house, all the big things that if we're an adult would be in the top 10 most stressful. He's probably taking 3 or 4 of them. His mum comes to me and says, I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do from school, and as much as I'm saying education is broken, a lot of this is not this. A lot of this is out of teachers' hands. It's not all, it's not about blaming teachers at all. This is the system that we have. But the teachers kind of just wasn't getting it. They didn't know him well. He hadn't come up from reception, as often in primaries here. And so what had happened is this little guy, he had been behind. He was playing the class clown, for want of a better word. He was really, egging everybody on. He was being that cheeky chap, really not rude, not naughty or in any way or misbehaving, but being that cheeky chap. But what it meant was, okay, he was fitting in a little bit better with his friends, but he was really struggling academically. And also, whenever anything happened, he would either blow, like really angry, began hitting mum, things like that, or he would just crumple, like absolutely crumple. And you could see it because at the end of the day, and these are the kind of things that we don't always see as parents, when we're with our kids 24/7, we don't always see the signs. But for me, his little demeanor was the fact that he was such an active little boy, but by the time it came to like 7:30, he was goosed. I mean, and he couldn't stay up later than that. I mean, we're talking 7, 8 now, so really you would expect a little bit later. So I knew that he was holding it all together as much as he could during the day at school to be well behaved, because that's what's expected of him.
Yes.
He was acting out at home. He was either sleeping, really quickly and just exhausted. And so what happened is we had a look at all the areas. So some of the areas that I mentioned, like, resourcefulness or that confidence that we see in kids. Also, he didn't have any confidence in his ability to learn. So that's why he was so far behind. He was definitely a resourceful little chap, because when I spoke to him and we were reading a book, he would get me any which way he can to read something for him. So instead of the usual way, goes, I'm not sure on that word, and you chip in, I kind of didn't. I hesitated and waited to see. And he asked me 3 or 4 different ways, like not just once, I don't know that, but 3 or 4 different ways to try and get me to read it for him. And that's when I knew, my God, this little guy is so resourceful. So we had a look at all the areas of resilience that I look. What's the community around him? Who is supporting him? Who is supporting his support network as well? So who's supporting mum and dad through all this? What his relationship was like with peers and teachers, things like that, and extended family, because extended family are so important, so important. And we'll probably come back to that. And then had a look at kind of what kind of character he was. He was very much this cheeky chap. So we looked at all of these, and then I started to put into place little things that just would help him with his confidence, grow his love of learning, and also build that support network, which he really didn't have right now. So what we did is we reached out to extended family, so cousins, helped him, and they would read with him, read to him, read for him, get him to read to them, but with no judgment, not, oh, why can't you read this already? Having a laugh with it, playing audiobooks, loads of stuff like that. So we reached out to them, reached out to auntie and uncles as well, and family friends. Right, okay, we need them to have him for a little while, but instead of just coming and playing, let's play around, different things, so that it wasn't just a break for mum or dad, but also it was seeing learning in action as well. So things like, fizzy pop and mints, where you do like a science experiment, explode, things like that. So we gave him lots of different things that he could do. We also looked at his routine, and we looked at discipline. Now, discipline for me isn't that where we say, all right, if you do that, then there's this consequence. It is it's a teaching moment. Discipline comes from the word to teach. So it was around teaching moments, and it was just as important for mum and dad as it was for him. But what I find is children become very anxious if they don't have a routine and if they don't know where the boundaries are. And the boundaries were lacking for very good reasons, because mum and dad were going through a really difficult time, and they were trying to overcompensate with this little guy. And what it meant was he was spiraling because he didn't know where he stood. So to cut long story short, 2 years later, I mean, it didn't take this long, but I know him now. This was a case from 2 years ago. I know him very well now. He is free reading in school. He has done so much better. And this was a kid that they turned around and said, the SEND specialist said to us, because I went in on a meeting, when he gets to high school, he's not going to be any further forward. At that point, I'm like, I have to tap out on this. Don't tell me that a kid hasn't got the ability to do this. Anyway, he is free reading. He has amazing little personality. He is so good. He can ask for help now. He's managing his own emotions. I'd say he hasn't hit mom in 6 months, if not longer, probably, actually, now thinking about timelines. He stopped that, and he's very respectful. He opens doors for his mom. He, helps around the house without moaning, which, let's face it, that's a rarity. And actually, since working, his mum and dad have split up, and you know what? He is amazing. He has took it on the chin. He's absolutely fine. He rarely gets upset about any of the things because they have a very clear routine. He knows when he's with dad, he knows what he's doing, he knows when he's with mum, what they're doing, things like that. And, you know, his resilience to get through a situation like that, all I can say is thank God they did the work when they did, you know, because when they did split, he's held it. He's been fine. He's managed it because he knew, and he's got the tools to be able to manage that as well. So yeah, he's a perfect little kind of character that has just come on leaps and bounds. And it's just about sometimes putting in very simple tools for mum and dad and bringing them back to the same page sometimes, and seeing what he needs, but also seeing what the family needs as well, and putting little things in that will support everybody there. And sometimes that's asking for help with the extended family.
Absolutely. And that you should finish on that, the extended family, because it just took me, as you were speaking, it just took me back to that thing that you said earlier about community and understanding. That is like one of the most important things that we all need, is a sense of community, whatever that looks like. If it's not immediate family, then people who we trust and know and love. Yeah, that's great. And just such a lovely story, that, isn't it? You know, that people can be very dismissive, you know, the fact that they were going to just write him off. And then there are, fortunately, wonderful people like your good self who can actually say, we're not going down that road. There is a better way forward.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for me is that children need to have expectations on them. And I don't mean, oh, they've got to do this, that, and the other, but I think when a child has an expectation that they are a member of a community, that they are a member of a family, not only does it bring the family closer together, but also it gives them a role. Because what you find, or what I find in my work, is they become distant, they come outside of the family unit, they spend more time isolating or in their room watching, playing, whatever, but not in the family community.
Yes.
And what happens is they then start to disrupt the family because they want back in. They're almost fighting to get back in, even though they've excluded themselves or they've been allowed to exclude themselves.
Yes.
So they're fighting to stay in. But when they have a role, when there's expectations, it means that they're valued for what they contribute. And don't we all want that in society, to be valued for who we are and what we give to our community? So, and that's a massive part of resilience building for me anyway. And I think when I see children, and not just children, but older teens as well, and they've kind of got to that path where they spend a lot of time in the room and stuff like that, and you're suddenly trying to bring them back in, it's more difficult the older they get, but you can do it. And actually they come in a different way, and whether it's to look at, you know, to help look after younger ones or things like that. So I'm massive advocate of having expectations on children, so not only they know their part in their family unit, but also so they know their part in the wider community out there, whether it's a school community, you know, whether they're doing extra after school clubs, things like that. But to be valued for that role that we play is a real big part of, you know, building our own character.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to come back to that, because I think that value also has a massive part to play in self-care. And I want to speak to you a little bit about that after this break.
Yes.
Right, so here we are, still having a fantastic conversation with Ashley Costello, talking about resilience and all the things that tie to it, building community, which I think is just so important for all of us. And you touched on, Ashley, the importance of that sense of value that, you know, we want our children to feel, but also that we as adults want to feel, and in many ways need to feel, in order for us to understand the importance of self-care. Now, I know when we spoke previously, you had mentioned about, you know, you know, as a woman, we kind of have a million hats to wear. You know, mum, we're looking after the home, we're daughters, we're caring for maybe elderly parents, and a myriad of other things. And on a personal level, you know, how has having all of those roles impacted your health in your journey? And what are the things that you have been able to put in place to ensure that you've been able to get back to valuing self and self-caring?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I can tell, obviously I have clients at least 3 days a week, sometimes 4, depending on, you know, how busy I am. I try and schedule. So that's one thing that I do, is I always schedule 1 or 2 days so that I've not got face-to-face clients. Not that I don't love them, but it's for my own, you know,
Yes.
bandwidth, as we're all saying now. But yeah, so I have to be very careful with that. I also have my own supervision, which I, you know, do all my offloading and stuff like that too. So that's really important. But one of the things that I've kind of realized is physically how it takes its toll as well. You know, it really does physically take its toll. And I would say about 2 years ago, maybe 18 months, I realized that suddenly, you know, you're not this 21-year-old that you think you are anymore. You're not got the, you know, the flexibility or the stamina that you had. And actually, when you're that age, you don't need to do anything to keep that up, because you just are. You're fit, you know, you're healthy and stuff like that. And so I very much decided that I was going to start exercising on a regular basis. I have done it before, you know, in fits and starts, but I'd kind of started to look at it a bit differently, that I wasn't just prioritizing it, which I needed to do, but also it wasn't just for me, because my kids are 11 and 13, you know, and I still want to be going on a zip line with them. I still want to be, you know, going on like an aqua park or going in the sea and things like that. And so I really did like prioritize that. And one of the big things that I do now, which kind of covers both aspects, it really helps me physically and also it helps me mentally, is I go open water swimming.
Nice.
Yeah, which I absolutely love, because it ticks a few boxes. I go with a group of ladies. And so it's not always the same group. We have a little WhatsApp group and we say, you know, who's going swimming today? So you never know who's going to go when you get there.
Yeah.
And the conversations that we have while we're swimming round is just beautiful. So it's tapping into that sense of community again. It's a support network. You can, you know, moan about, you know, the dog or your husband or whatever if you want on the way round. I'll talk about work, you know, things like that. So for me, it's been really important for me to prioritize, but carve out. So I literally schedule, like I would a client, I schedule that time. Absolutely. And my family know it's a non-negotiable as well. So unless, you know, obviously, unless something was, it really like came up that was really important. But the reason that I say, so for instance, back when the football was on, and we were talking about Euros, and I think we was in the semi-finals and stuff, the kids and hubby wanted to kind of watch the match all together, and I said, oh, I'm going for a swim. And it's not that, I mean, I'm not massive into football, but that for us would have been a family thing.
Yes.
I'm going for a swim, I'll be back. So I will be back, but I'll miss the start of the match. But I am going, oh, but Mummy, can you not stay, you know, and I'm going, I'm not missing it all, mate, but I need to go because I've arranged this, you know. And so it's important for them to see, you know, not just your kids, but your partner as well, that this is important. It's a great role model for kids to go, I'm doing this because this makes me happy, it makes me healthy, it makes me fit. And actually, this is a commitment I've also made to my friends that I'm meeting there. So it's a real good role model to not just schedule it, but to stick to it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, you are speaking my language, actually. Role modeling, you know, key. I mean, you know, if we want to show our kids how to look after themselves, we need to show up looking after ourselves, right? And that whole thing around scheduling is, you know, I always say, book it into your diary as if it was a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment. You know, just make it so, and don't keep on thinking it's the easiest thing to throw out because something else has come along. So, oh my goodness, I love that message. That is so, so important. And I know that you said that, you know, you've learned through learning to prioritize yourselves. You've also been able to accept things like, you know, I cannot do it all.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the myth that us women have swallowed almost like a whale. Do you know what I mean? I think we've taken this gigantic lie and just swallowed it over the last, and I think it comes from, you know, I've looked into this a little bit, and I think it comes from, if we go back a couple of generations to like my grandparents' generation, mum, you know, the mum would have stayed in the home place. When the kids were older, if she got a job, she was probably lucky to be able to get like a little part-time job, which was considered pin money. You know, then their children, so going back to my mum's generation, they wanted careers. They absolutely wasn't going to stay at home. They wanted careers, you know, and so it became, okay, well, let's open all these nurseries that take kids from 6 months to... That's if you didn't have a support network. I know my mum was a big career woman. I went to grandparents, which I was very fortunate because when I was very small, I lived abroad. And so we didn't have that. So I went to a nursery from being a very tiny, tiny baby. When I came home, I could go to grandparents. But to my, you know, to kind of my generation now, where we think we've got to be home for the kids, we've got to do all the cooking and cleaning, we've got to have this amazing career, which was splashing all over Instagram, as well as, you know, Saturday, I'm watching the kids play football, look at my picture here, you know, Sunday, oh, we're all either going to church together or we're having Sunday dinner, look at this massive roast I've just made. And it's like, just stop, ladies, just stop. We cannot do everything, absolutely not do everything. This morning I just spoke to a lady whose kids are struggling a little bit, but actually the conversation was more around her. She contacted me because of her kids, but then when we spoke about it, she was running a massive business. Her mum is really poorly. You know, she's got 2 kids that are struggling, a husband who runs his own business as well. And I said, just stop, right? Who's helping you? And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, right, the kids don't need you to take them to school. Tell your husband, give him the list of the things that you have got on your plate right now and say, what can you take from me? Go to your sister and say, this is what we need to do with mum. What are you doing? Stop trying to do it all, because we're women. We are amazing, but we are not inhuman. Do you know what I mean? We can't do everything. And I think once you kind of accept the fact that we don't have to do everything. Oh, that is such a relief. It is such a relief. Not
sweet
to do
joy.
It is, absolutely. And I have a really good, you know, I'm blessed with a really good husband and father for the kids. He is, you know, he's really good. But even, you know, there's some days where I go, so who's making dinner tonight then? And everyone will look at me and I'll be like, well, I've done it for the last 3 nights. Surely it can't be my turn. Oh, okay, we'll do it. You know, but sometimes it's just bringing it to their awareness. You know, now my 13-year-old makes dinner every Monday and my 11-year-old makes dinner every Friday. And yeah, we might have pizza most Fridays because that's A, his choice, and B, you can do it easy. You know, this week we went to fajitas just to go out there a little bit. And yeah, there's a mess in the kitchen afterwards, but you know what? It's such a relief not to have to think and juggle all the time. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. I love it. I mean, that's just, it is, I mean, that is the reality, isn't it? Is that all of these things have to get done. You don't have to be the one doing every single one of them. And that
hallelujah.
Hallelujah. That is the point. Oh my goodness, fantastic. Thank you so much for stating that so clearly and so beautifully, Ashley, because I think that is such an important message, certainly to the listeners of this show. You know, women, please, you know, you've got to go to the replay of this and hear that again, because it's such a key message to take on board. Well, listen, Ashley, we're going to have one more break. When we come back, just an opportunity for you to share a little bit about how our listeners can contact you and find out more about what you do. Well, here we are, the final part of the show. Ashley Costello has been enlightening us about resilience, but also sharing some, oh my goodness, poignant and important points on self-care. I cannot stress enough how I second, third and fourth all of the things that you said in that last segment. I mean, so on point. But Ashley, I really want to now just give you an opportunity to let the listeners know how they can find out about the work that you do and reach out to you.
Well, I think just before I do that, Yvonne, if you don't mind, I think there's two things that I kind of wanted to say. And
Yes.
One is, as a mum and as a woman, saying no is an act of self-care in my book. And it's important for kids to hear that. And it's important for your partner to hear that sometimes, that actually, no, I can't take that on. So no is definitely always in my pocket.
Yes.
If it's needed, it absolutely comes out, because that is looking after your own boundaries and stuff. And then the other thing is, which is related to kind of my work, is don't ever be afraid to ask for help, because there's no such thing as a perfect parent. You know, I'm a psychotherapist of over 20 years, and I still, like, some days pull my hair out with my own kids, you know, because they push our buttons. They're the only ones who can really trigger us in that. So, you know, don't be afraid to ask for help. And sometimes it's just a case of somebody else giving you a different perspective. And that's often what my job is. Yes, of course, I can tell you why they're doing that, why they're behaving like that, why their brain, where the brain is at right now and stuff like that. But no, if you want to find out more information from me, I have two websites. So one is theresilientkid.co.uk and the other one's resilientwoman.co.uk as well, which we cater for both. Have a look at my TEDx talk. Is education broken? The answer is yes, by the way, no spoiler there. And follow me on Instagram. We've got accounts on Insta, and we've got a free Facebook group as well for parents and educators, because, you know, the only way we're going to fix education is for our teachers and educators and parents to come together for a new way, really.
Wonderful. Excellent. Ashley, what can I say? Thank you so much for your insights, for sharing those fantastic, you know, top of the chart self-care tips. And they are so important. I cannot stress it enough. You've been incredibly generous with your knowledge. And I just want to thank you on my behalf, but also on behalf of the listeners.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Honestly, I've been looking forward to this for ages, and to actually finally get to speak to you, Yvonne, and you know, to be there for the listeners. So please feel free, reach out anytime. There's always a listening ear at The Resilient Kid. So
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, and keep up the good work, Yvonne, please.
Oh, bless.
It's invaluable.
Both ways. That works both ways. Thank you so much, Ashley.
You're welcome. Take care.